Hi, thanks for joining. My name is Callum Beaumont, the founder of Cordell Beaumont and the host of Maritime Software Hub. In today's episode, got a slightly different format. I'm going to bring in my colleague and one of our company directors, Daniel Duggin. He's going to talk to us about his experience in the maritime software space, both from a user point of view during his broking days and also now in the recruitment space and the markets that he works with. So I hope you find this enjoyable. Dan's a really diligent, articulate, and very kind of loyal and honest guy. He gives a good impression everywhere he goes. So I'm really pleased and delighted to have him on. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Hi, Dan. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm very excited to be here. It's the first one of hopefully many. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
No, definitely. It's good to have you on and obviously to introduce you. I've been hogging the mic probably a little bit too long now. So it's good to get, hear your story. And this episode is really going to be more perhaps about your profile and the role that you do in Cordell Beaumont. And we can talk about what we're seeing in the markets at the moment and give an overview of our solution, that type of thing. So it's going to be a bit of a shorter episode in this recording. Probably just really go through what we are both kind of focusing on at the moment, any key kind of discussions and topics that are coming up regularly. So before I go into too much, it'd be great if you could give us a bit of background for yourself and a bit of an overview perhaps of what you do at Cordell Beaumont.
Yeah, sure. So well, first of all, I'm Daniel Duggin. I'm director with Cordell Beaumont. I joined the company in September 2020, so just after the pandemic had hit. Yeah. So it was a really interesting time to start a new journey. But since then, it's been great. We've seen a lot of changes, obviously, mainly around remote working. But things have been really interesting for the maritime software industry, and I think there's a lot of interesting developments still going on. But my background before the recruitment side was actually more of in commercial shipping, very much like yourself. So I got into shipping starting as a tanker operator with EA Gibson's. So I did an internship there during my summer after graduating from university, and then very fortunately got the opportunity to join them full-time as a tanker operator, which gave me a huge amount of insight to the daily operations within maritime, which was really fascinating. I learned a hell of a lot there. And then moved on from the operations side to the broking side in 2015, just after a year of doing tanker ops. I got the opportunity to go and be a tanker broker with Clarkson's.
Was that, sorry to interrupt you, was that always kind of in your mind? You wanted to maybe start in ops and then move over to be a broker eventually?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I was very motivated to get into the shipbroking world. But operations is such a fantastic platform for that. It really gives you the insight of how to deal with client relations. You very much are in the middle of trying to make the smooth operations for the vessel there. Very clear communication skills. It's also a job where many people don't realize it, but you're on call 24/7. Yeah. So it's very intense. You're constantly having to manage things and be on top of things. So I think that really teaches you some very valuable skills to then progress onto the broking.
What was it that kind of really appealed to you about broking? From the, I know you obviously your father was a broker for many years.
Yeah.
Was there anything in particular that stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to grow up within the maritime industry. It's similar to yourself. So my father was a Cape-size broker for about 40 years. So I grew up surrounded by people in maritime. So I really got to see the sort of the travel opportunities that were there, sort of to the interesting things around the industry, not just in shipping itself, but also like the wider economy and the effects the shipping market has on that. So I always had an interest in it. I was very fortunate, say, to be surrounded by these people and learned a lot from a young age. So I was always quite motivated to go down that route. There were probably some other opportunities calling out there, but I always felt like shipping was in the blood and something that I really felt a strong passion towards.
Fantastic. Good. And then, I mean, obviously we both worked together at Clarkson's, and it's funny, I remember speaking to you kind of perhaps towards the latter end of your time at Clarkson, and we were talking about perhaps possible next steps and that type of thing. So we've kind of come full circle now with you obviously joining us. So how have you found the shift from kind of more commercial broking over to the more shipping and obviously the more digital shipping recruitment side? What's the sort of
difference? So I was quite fortunate during my time at Clarkson's. It was actually around when Maritech, so C by Maritech was set up. So a couple of other brokers, including myself, we actually ended up getting involved with a couple of their software products from a broker's perspective. So we got quite involved with the IT guys in terms of user interfaces and how they wanted to develop the product, sort of from its infancy, really. So we saw that transition coming. And it was really interesting to be involved with that from the beginning. And then it just sort of seems to have really exploded over the last 5 years. I would say you've seen a lot of startups coming into the space. It always seemed that shipping's been very traditionally voice broked, which is great, but there's so much technology out there that you've got to utilize it. So yeah, moving from that traditional commercial space into the more digital space has been a really interesting transition. Obviously, always keeping involved with the broking side as well. But I think that's been, for me, it's been really interesting to come onto the recruitment side and learn a lot more about the other companies, what they're also doing in the digital space. Not just commercial maritime software that's out there to help brokers and charterers and traders, but also the more technical side, which is really helping vessel maintenance, performance, decarbonisation. The scope is huge. So it's been very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think you're in quite a rare position to have that user experience basically of the solutions and things. And I think it's great. And it means that when we tend to speak to people within our market, we have a little bit of an insight into what the goal is of each software platform and who the sort of target kind of client base is likely to be and what problem they're trying to solve. So it's really valuable that you've got that experience. And I know when I sort of went from broking into the recruitment space, I thought there were quite a lot of similarities between recruitment and shipbroking. In the way that essentially you're still a middleman. You're kind of essentially trying to put two and two people together, whether it's a vessel or a cargo or whatever. Obviously, people in a role and a job opportunity. So you're still very much kind of always on the front foot and prospecting. And normally, if you don't kind of keep pushing, pipeline dries up, and unfortunately, things can slow down. So it's really like broking. It's all about kind of your reputation and getting out there and creating opportunities for yourself. So that's why I think your background in broking ties in very nicely with recruitment.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, it's a massive people industry. Everyone knows that with the maritime world is very like face-to-face meetings, networking, constantly on the phone. So it's very similar to recruitment. So I think that's something that we've both always enjoyed doing. I'd say, it's really given us opportunities to do that, probably even more so now. With all these companies coming around. So,
and I definitely missed the physical, the sort of in-person type of meetings. We do a lot of Zoom calls and Teams calls mainly, but I mean, for example, tomorrow we've got a first kind of client lunch we've had in a little while, and we've started to do more and more of these in London. And it's just it was a real shame when you first joined. You probably had a good year or so, mainly of lockdown. So even we and the rest of the team couldn't necessarily kind of socialize as much as an early stage. But now lots of events are happening, and we make a point of traveling and sponsoring a number of the sort of the Smart Maritime Network events or Digital Ship and some of the other functions, which I know you enjoy going to.
They're fantastic. Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah, really good. And so what does your day-to-day look like now, would you say, in your role? Before we start, actually, so you've obviously you joined us in a kind of recruitment consultant role, and you've progressed and you've done well, and in a pretty short space of time, you've kind of been promoted to a director level. So now in your role, what would you kind of say your main kind of day-to-day objectives are and kind of duties and tasks that you do each day?
We're still covering recruitment on a 360 basis. So whether it's trying to find new leads, new prospects on the business development side, constantly increasing our clientele, but also keeping in contact with candidates on a regular basis. We might be involved with either searching for particular roles or trying to help candidates find new opportunities out there. So still very much that 360. But then also with other people in Cordell Beaumont, where we're sort of trying to help them develop, sort of teaching them skills around searching for candidates, or trying to do this again, utilize their skills to help us on the business development side. That's something I've really enjoyed doing, actually, working with a couple of other people to help them hone their recruitment skills. But also just on that day-to-day, really just speaking to as many people as possible, finding out the trends in the market, seeing what's going to come next, and just keeping on top of things is so important.
No, it's good. And you mentioned about mentoring, and as I said, we're currently hiring now for someone, a recruiter in the UK. Probably going to mainly be based in London, but it's going to be your first kind of direct report. That's going to kind of you take under your wing. Yeah. So maybe like I'll put you on the spot a bit here, but like let's say if you were looking to hire someone, what kind of personality traits would you look for, perhaps in someone that you'd like to kind of bring into your team?
Okay, that's a really good question, but I think above all else is honesty. I think you've really got to build trust within your team. I think you be transparent with each other, and I say it all boils down to being honest with each other. So ever just like if you're struggling in a particular area, don't see it as a weakness, reach out for help. If you're sort of unhappy with anything, let's address it, talk about it, find a solution to the problem. Like anything that needs to be done, I think honesty is such an integral part. I also think that you need to be incredibly diligent in your work. I think we hold ourselves to a very high professional standard here. So I think
excuse the casual attire, but other than that, yeah.
But yeah, I think in terms of how we present and our communications with clients, so whether that be a Teams meeting, an in-person meeting, or like a written email, having really good, concise but clear communication is so important. I mean, that's something I picked up very early in my tanker operations days. Making sure key points were there, being very precise with what you're doing. So
especially when you're dealing with different languages all the time, like our client base are completely international. So it could be somebody from Greece or emailing to, or Norway or Germany or the Middle East. So it really does make a big difference, as you say, having like a kind of well written and well thought out messages and clear and concise is really important.
Yeah, and also, so I was just going to add to that. I just think someone who's personable. This industry is such a people industry. So you need to be engaging, you need to be friendly. I think if you've got those sort of core personality traits, then you're on a good platform to succeed.
Yeah, and on technology wise as well. So, I mean, we invest heavily with our partner Recruit Hub, who manages our tech stack and our platform and has helped us scale over the last 3 or 4 years. They've been a fantastic help. So we're always on the lookout for the latest tech, basically, that can help our recruiters and our team kind of either streamline their processes, make things more simple, or perhaps kind of come up with very clever ways to get access to certain kind of profiles or kind of job leads, that type of stuff. So do you think somebody that's kind of familiar with, or just generally quite adept, is that right? Adept with technology is also quite a good trait to have.
It's a great skill set to have, yeah. I mean, I think in terms of with the personality traits, we've covered that, but in terms of the skill set, being able to understand certain types of CRM systems, obviously, searching systems that we use, having your sort of up-to-date knowledge of tech is so important now. There's so many different platforms out there for recruiters to use, but on the whole, they're sort of fairly similar. But if you've got that type of background, that's only going to help you push on and succeed in a quicker time. And these tools are so valuable and so useful. I mean, I think we use them all the time. We get a lot of traction from using our software tools. So if it's something you're familiar with, or at least have got a keen interest in learning, that's a very important skill set to have.
Definitely, especially in most of our clients are maritime software providers or something related to that sort of trade. So yeah, it definitely adds a lot of value. Cool. Okay, great. So just to finish on that point, so if for example, anybody is interested in listening or watching, that might be perhaps interested in a career or discussion with us about opportunities either now or perhaps down the line, in a recruitment type of role, or maybe a more senior function, whatever might be interested for you, reach out to Dan or myself. Be delighted to have a chat. But let's move over to perhaps more of our core audience base, which is perhaps more people in the maritime software space, or the kind of data analytics, that sort of area. If you were talking to someone, let's say, from the shipping space that hasn't had any experience in the technology side, what's kind of generally, what do you tend to say to them when they're thinking about the possibilities of moving over? Like, and I know how I kind of articulate, but how do you tend to articulate it, like the scope and the opportunity to people?
It's a really interesting one, because I think there's some people in the more traditional shipping companies, or have a more traditional shipping background, that aren't necessarily aware of what's going on within the digital landscape. But then there's a lot of people who are interested but aren't necessarily that invested in it. So I think it depends on what role they're currently doing, and how there may be products out there that are targeted towards their particular area. So whether you're talking to someone who's sailed on board vessels, or someone who is an operator or charterer, sort of almost talking to them about what their current role is and how their skill set would relate to the particular company or a particular type of products that are out there. And if they're currently using any of these products. You speak to some candidates, and there may be a role that's going at the moment, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that product was owned by that particular company, and we use it every day. So there might be something out there that they're using every day, but they don't think too much about the company that's behind it all. And then they start exploring that reason. And I think that's probably the easiest way to explain to them, is how those products help their role at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I guess in the actual kind of role function that perhaps they could go and slot into in a technology focused business. Say, for example, obviously, if you're a broker, it might be quite likely that you go into a sales role. Could be the obvious one, whether that's a business development role, or it could be more of a kind of a client onboarding kind of liaison type of role, like, I don't know, senior customer success manager or something like that, where your main role is making sure you're building those relationships, making sure they understand the solutions, and if something needs to be changed or released, or a new module is uploaded, that you're the one that's helping them with that upsell and driving the renewals. And then you get the more, maybe someone in vessel operations, or someone that's been on board a ship, and perhaps they could be more along the lines of perhaps working on the actual modules themselves, so the individual products that the maritime software companies offer. Perhaps they're very focused on, for example, vessel performance or voyage optimization or route analysis, that type of thing. Their background could really fit in nicely to those sort of functions and roles. So I think there's so much scope for people in the space. And also it kind of links to other markets. We know that when we recruit for companies, sometimes they may consider candidates from the core maritime space, or maybe they might look at the supply chain space, or satellite communication space that kind of is loosely linked to maritime in some way. So I think there's lots of avenues for people from different industries to get into maritime software if they want.
100%. I mean, they say that you've mentioned 3 different types of sector there that all overlap. And even when we go to these events, you see different companies at the event that, you say there may be a satellite communications company, or they may be someone who's much more focused on decarbonisation. I mean, it's a huge area for shipping at the moment, is to increase efficiency. So whether that's weather routing, or whether it's on the actual vessel's performance, or type of bunkers that they're burning and where they get sourcing their bunkers from on pricing as well. There's products now out there for those kind of things. So I think like every area of the maritime industry is being tapped into on the digitalization. And once you really start digging, you realize how many different areas and parts of this are involved. And like you mentioned about supply chain as well. So there's a lot of scope, and it's about also trying to get these companies to see what each other are doing and also find out a way of how they work together.
Definitely.
It's something we constantly see. This is a little bit of a challenge, but
and that's where these events, I know Binnacle was doing the digital progress that we're part of as well, and the main goal is to bring people together, share ideas and collaboration. And I guess from an end user point of view, you have so many options, perhaps, and different solution providers selling to you all the time, and it might be a bit kind of confusing about which one's best or what works with another module. So what can we use that kind of ties in with another solution to save another 6 months worth of onboarding type of thing. So yeah, I agree. I think I mentioned it in another podcast. I think there's more and more companies are kind of consolidating and merging. I mean, recently we saw Vesson and Vessel's Value. So some big names are now partnering up, and in a way, it might shrink the market to a point, I'd say. But if anything, it just makes these companies even more attractive, perhaps, to people from outside the space. And I think that these guys, these are the solutions they're offering. This is what they've done. They've acquired these businesses and stuff. It can be pretty exciting, I think, for someone not from our market. So,
yeah, definitely.
Good. Okay, cool. So I guess as far as, I don't want to talk too much about COVID, but I mean, how do you think, let's say, the last couple of years since you joined, the kind of hiring trends have changed? Have you seen much of a dip sort of in certain points, or what's been in your impression?
I think it's been a very interesting 2.5 years since I joined. I think when I first came into recruitment or was involved with recruitment, it was very much a space where people were in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
The idea of even hybrid working wasn't really discussed. And then all of a sudden, everyone was working fully remote. So the transition we saw was, rather than maybe looking to hire in a particular location and looking for the best person in that area, companies started to look for what they thought was the best person for that job, almost regardless of location. Ideally, if they were in the right time zone, that was more desirable.
Yeah.
But for candidates and clients alike, they were way more flexible on remote working. And it's something that hung around for a little bit after the pandemic came to an end. And that changed the way we were doing our roles. So, we had probably a wider candidate pool, which was very interesting, getting to speak to people and what was really important to them. But now we've also seen that change. So where people originally wanted to work fully remote, people are now coming back to a stage where I think they like to be on a more of a hybrid model. They like seeing people face to face again. They like getting a bit more of a routine. And we've also seen some companies go back to almost 4 or 5 days a week in the office, depending on the role. But I think there's been this almost a bit of a 180 from where we were last year or sort of around the pandemic time. But it is very much depending on where companies are based and what their culture's like.
Yeah, and on that point of kind of remote working, and from your point of view, do you think it's had an impact kind of on your own kind of mental well-being, like your relationship at home and with work? How has it impacted you?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's maybe my personality, but I'm a lot happier probably working in a more remote environment. I actually live just outside of London, so I used to commute every day, about sort of hour and a half each way. So it's 3 hours of my day commuting, which I fortunately no longer have to do something like that. So I feel more energized. I feel a bit more refreshed when I'm doing my role. I also find it's easier for me to sort of work around flexible hours in the evening, if there's things I need to cover out of working hours, it's much easier for me to be at home. I can just quickly log on and sort out what I need to sort out. It's quite nice just to go for where I live is quite countryside, so I quite like to go out for a walk if I can. That's sort of time dependent, but get out, get some sunshine, get some fresh air, rather than walking out into a really like busy city with lots of cars going past.
Everything feels like work, doesn't it? When you get into London, you get off the train or where you're going to, you immediately feel like you're at work. Until you get off that train on the platform when you're at home, you then start to switch off.
Yeah, but I feel like also here is that I have a designated workspace. I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, true.
I have my workstation. Once the sort of day ends, I tend to try and close the door, forget about that, unwind. And also with remote working, people might think it's very isolating, but what we've started to do is, where we've been traveling, with international travel, like say tomorrow, we've got this meeting in London again. Yeah. We get the face-to-face time and we almost dictate that. So when we do get the face-to-face time, it's valuable time. It's not just sort of as and when you might be in an office or someone's around the corner. I think it's much better to get someone to engage with you and make that time as valuable as possible. So for me, I actually really enjoy it, but you might appreciate it's not everyone's cup of tea.
I'm kind of the opposite. I miss our dartboard. I miss the games we used to play in the office, I'll be honest with you. But no, it has its definitely pros and cons. Like we've got 3 dogs here, 2 kids and everything. So it can at times be pretty full on. And I just lock myself away in the office most of the time. But,
I'm not at that stage yet, so I don't have those distractions. Just me at home during the day.
I did like that, getting out, I don't know, 10, 12 hours, then coming back and it's bedtime. Okay, no problem. Put them to bed. But no, it's good. I think a mixture is really healthy.
Yeah, I agree.
And especially, as I said, on the mental health side, I think you need that interaction face to face and little things like we use stuff like, I know it sounds obvious, but Slack. We do our Teams calls every Monday and Thursday morning. So we've got some sort of structure there where at least you're going to definitely touch points, speak to people face to face. But yeah, I think it's key to have, like you said, a designated workspace and somewhere you can kind of shut off afterwards. It's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, any I think for me that's kind of a nice little introduction to what you're going to be, what you do at Cordell Beaumont, and obviously you're going to be speaking to some guests coming up fairly shortly as well. So I think it'd be really exciting for our listeners to hear your point of view and hear from the contacts that you bring in as well. So any questions? Anything you want to talk about before we go? Are we all good?
I think we've given a really good insight. Let's say if anyone's thinking about a career in recruitment within the maritime industry in particular,
don't do it.
Digital.
Yeah. I'm stealing Ami's comment, but yes.
I think it's a really exciting industry. I think that the people you get to speak with and the things you learn is so insightful and just a really interesting industry. I mean, maybe something that you currently do, maybe you work in maritime already, but being able to be somewhere where you get to speak to such a vast variety of people globally is, for me, one of the best things you can do. And you really learn a lot. It's a great platform for learning, and you're constantly there's no 2 days are the same, I don't think.
I think it's like shipping in a way. Like if you're a broker, you can strive to be the best broker in the world. And you look at the big names, people know them across the market, and it's the same in recruitment. You have that uncapped ability to try and create a name for yourself, build a reputation, build a brand around you and your team, and that's why I love it. Like, there's no real barriers to entry. You just got to hopefully deliver and get people to like you is the main thing. So no, I think it's enjoyable, and especially if you have a passion for doing a deal. And you kind of want to enrich your life by hopefully kind of not necessarily about money, but money can help facilitate other things like travel, time, that sort of stuff. And recruitment is a great platform for that. But it is definitely hard work. I think we know that very well. You get peaks and troughs. But if you build some really strong kind of meaningful relationships with some clients, and it's really generally very valuable when you help people kind of propel their careers forward. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, really good.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's end on that note. But thank you for listening, everyone. And Dan, thank you for your time.